Bry's Comics.
Please forgive the camera work in this video. I just got a new camera and it's big and it's heavy and I usually don't take it off the stand. So if you can persevere through the shakiness of the camera work, I think there's some really cool information presented in this video, some thought-provoking topics, and obviously some really cool comic books to look at. But before we hop into it, if you subscribe to the channel, comment on this video, and like this video, you're entered to win a free slab. And if you head over to bryscomics.com and sign up for the newsletter, you're entered to win a free slab over there each and every month. Tons of new inventory being added all the time, and use code COLLECT10 for 10% off all in-stock items at bryscomics.com. You can also find me on Instagram for trades, for grails, other fresh content over there, and of course on Whatnot, where I go live as often as possible for live comic book auctions that are a ton of fun, chances to win free stuff, and a whole lot more. Those that follow the channel know that the most recent video I posted was about why I sold most of my personal collection. So I wanted to do a follow-up video detailing the books that did not get sold, the ones that stayed behind in the PC, and why. So as I mentioned in that previous video about why I sold most of my personal collection, it was so that I could buy it all back at a later date and hopefully upgrade a lot of the books that were in my PC. So I have all of that money set aside and I'm just waiting for the market to show some stability, get to the point where I think we're at the bottom, and I'm gonna go crazy buying back all of the books that I sold off, and hopefully and then some. And I actually already made my first purchase for the first grail that was on my list, so make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell if you're interested in seeing what I picked up already here in 2023. So for my personal collection, I like to keep it at or under 50 CGC graded comic books in my personal collection. So for me, that's the back wall and then also an additional box of graded comics. And I think that that number 50, I mean, you can upgrade and get into some very, very expensive books. So I think even if I collect until the day I die, I might be able to keep it under 50 graded comic books, because as some of you know, I mean, some of these grails get just into astronomical prices. So for me, that's a number that I chose, and it's a very personal thing. Some people like to collect any and everything, or maybe they have more space, but I like the idea of 50 graded comic books. It doesn't take up a whole lot of space. You can get some incredibly high quality books and still, you know, have a really awesome collection. You have enough wiggle room to, you know, replace stuff. And I don't really like to have things in my personal collection that I can't enjoy. Like, it kind of bothers me to have a whole box of books that I can't actually even look at. So, you know, that's why I choose that number. Now, this is flexible, and that's a huge part about comic book collecting, is it's important to stay flexible. I mean, this is a hobby that we're supposed to enjoy, and as soon as you put rules on it that you can't, you know, break, I mean, that's the last thing that I want, is rules and to have this like strict regimen of what I can and can't do. This is comic book collecting, right? So I very well could change that point of view. I may up it to 100 books or 500 books, or switch to collecting raw books. It's all good. It's okay to change directions. And I think it's actually a healthy part of this hobby, is to get to a point to reassess, because that's happened to me multiple times where I've gone, okay, what am I doing here? What do I want to do here? And, you know, redirect the course of collecting. So with that said, let's take a look at the collection at this point in time. So there it is in its entirety, guys. The very different personal collection over the last few years, but I gotta say, I am absolutely thrilled with it. I love this wall as it currently sits. Every time I walk into this room, it brings a smile to my face, and that is an awesome, awesome thing. However, it will look drastically different over the next couple years. Starting off here, we have Amazing Spider-Man number 800. This is the Gabriel Del Otto 1 in 200 incentive variant for this book. It's signed by Gabriel Del Otto and Humberto Ramos. And this is just a wall hanger. It's a placeholder. It goes great in this custom slab stand that I have that one day will house either AF15 or ASM1. But for now, I'm absolutely thrilled to be looking at that one. Camera Comics number 3. This is just an incredibly rare Golden Age book. It's a 5.5 white pages. I got it in the Matthew Manos collection, and I just could not let it go. It's got the chick on the cover knocking out a Nazi. Right here it says, Linda Lenz, woman photographer. I just love how they delineate her as a woman photographer like that was an anomaly or something back then. But it's just a wall hanger. It presents incredibly well for a 5.5. I thought about cracking it and sending it back in, but it's like, if I could get this bumped to a 6.5, would it really matter? There's so few sales. It's not like you can really get like a measurable price increase, because there's not going to be sales for a 5.5 or a 6.5. So not sure it really makes sense to send it back in. I would be willing to let that go and put something in its place, but for the time being, it's great. Same with this one here, Cool Cat Volume 8, number 6. This is actually Cool Cat number 1. It's just one of those situations where the numbering is continued from a previous issue. And this one just makes me smile. I have almost nothing into this book. I submitted it myself, so it's basically just the grading fees. And it's not necessarily a valuable book, although it is incredibly rare. It's the only one on the census, and that, I think, adds to the cool factor of it. Tales to Astonish number 27, the first appearance of Ant-Man, and this is the UK price variant. Those that follow the channel know that I'm a huge fan of the UK price variants. I think they're undervalued. I did a whole video on that, and you can go check that out if you haven't already. I guess you could say I overpaid for this book. I paid $8,000 for it, which at the time was a good deal, but it has come down probably 10 or 20% since then, and I thought, you know, maybe I could sell it and then buy back in, but the timing just isn't right for this. Because say, for example, if I sold it for $6,000 today, I haven't looked at prices in a while, but what can I buy back in when the price comes down? I'm sure this book will come down a little bit after the movie comes out, like all, you know, MCU films do. But this book is a little bit different. Tales to Astonish 27 is like super, super rare of all the grails. It's one of the most rare grails. And, you know, if I sold it today for $6, I don't think I could buy another 6 or a 6.5 or a 7 when prices come back down. So it just doesn't make sense to sell it. So this will just be my copy. You know, maybe at some point in the future I might upgrade it, but that would have to come after all the other grails are acquired. This one just goes great with it, especially since it's the same grade. This is Tales to Astonish 28, so it's basically the exact same story as 27. You know, the scientist there drinks the potion, but in this one he becomes Gorilla Man. I think it's just hilarious that it's essentially the same story. This one totally works, this one did not work, but it's absolutely just a wall hanger. I could part with that. Here's Something is Killing the Children, number 1, the local comic shop day foil edition, and it's a 9.9. It's one of only 3 in the world that's graded at a 9.9, none higher, and there's, you know, thousands of other copies on the census and only 3 9.9s. Is it truly a 9.9? What separates this from a 9.8? Absolutely nothing. This book has multiple color breaking things. Those little white marks you see along the spine are color breaking spine rub from being shipped in a box, and there's like 3 or 4 of those all along the spine. There's absolutely no difference between this and a 9.8. However, the label is different. It says 9.9 on the label, and that is actually saying something. Like, there's only 3 of those. So in a situation like this, you're absolutely buying the label and not the book, which I wouldn't recommend if you have a book that's like $50,000 because of that label. Like Amazing Spider-Man 361, First Appearance of Carnage. Like, I wouldn't recommend paying an absurd premium for a 9.9 in a situation like that. Something is Killing the Children, number 1. This is the first print, cover A, signed by James Tynion. And here is the Brazil Free Comic Book Day edition, which is incredibly low print. I got a super good deal on this. It's signed and sketched by Werther Dell'Edera with that awesome Erica Slaughter sketch right there. And so I think that these 3 just go great together. I think that Something's Killing the Children has massive potential. Here's my trifecta of the Joe Rubinstein homage covers, including the original Wolverine number 1 Joe Rubinstein cover with that classic come here look, and of course the Bryce Comics exclusive. This was the first version that Enyaq Lee did for it. It's kind of the same time as a bunch of other variants he did with Crescent and Io, Luna Snow, and White Fox. This is the 1 in 100 for White Fox, and then Of course, the Bryce Comics exclusive for Miles Morales #1 in that similar pose. Over here, we have another book that I overpaid for. Iron Fist, the first appearance of Iron Fist in a 9.6, signed by Stan Lee. I'm a sucker for Stan Lee. What do you think of that, Stan Lee? Do you think I overpaid for that? I bought this at the peak of the market. It was like $3,500 I ended up paying for this. There's only 13 signature series in the world, and I think I'd be lucky to get out of it what I paid for it. I do think there's a lot of potential for Iron Fist books if they reintroduce them in the MCU and do them right. So this is one of those books. It's not a forever book for me. I do enjoy it, especially because it's signed by Stan Lee. It goes great in the Stan Lee signature stand that I had custom made there. So if I didn't enjoy it, I would have just sold it at a loss. If I made a bad purchase and a bad spec, it makes more sense to take your loss as soon as you realize you're going to, rather than hold on to it. If you have your $3,500 into a book, waiting until that book goes back up to $3,500 to break even is not a good investment strategy, because you could put that same money into something that will have a better return. So sometimes we get trapped in that way of thinking, but it's kind of not a logical way to go about investing, is by putting a lot of thought into what you paid for it. What's more important is like the market and other opportunities that you could have for that same amount of money. So here's the Stan Lee signature series watch that my wife got for me for my birthday. There it is there. I absolutely love this watch. It's got Stan Lee's face. It's got the signature replica on it. Well done, Stan. Then over here we have Quivers #1 and 9.8, the single highest graded on the census, first published work by Brian Michael Bendis, cover, story, and art. And it's the single highest graded in the world. Super happy about that one. I have a little theme in my collection for first published works for notable artists, and Brian Michael Bendis being one of the most influential architects of the Ultimate Universe, which I think will have big impact in the future of the MCU. I think that book has a lot of potential, and it's just a really cool 90s cover to boot. Tarot #1, the 1 in 50, David Nakayama. This is just one of my favorite Scarlet Witch covers, and it's going to go great with a future Grail that I have purchased, and it's going to go with this statue over here of Scarlet Witch, so stay tuned for a future video on that. Here's kind of a funny one, Marvel Superheroes Volume 2 #8, the Winter Special. This is the first appearance of Squirrel Girl, and I bought this book because my son was all into Squirrel Girl, and now he's not. So this is definitely something that I will move on from. I do think there's some spec potential for Squirrel Girl. She's like a children's character, so that's not going to be like this massive, desire for this book, but it will have, its day in the sun eventually. Alias #1 in a 9.8, signed by Stan Lee. This is the first appearance of Jessica Jones, and I'm a huge fan of Jessica Jones. I'm a huge fan of Signature Series. I got this for such a great deal on eBay years ago. I just can't bring myself to sell it. And if at some point there was not room on the wall, it would hit the chopping block, but for now I'm happy to own that one. Samurai Santa, this is a PC book. This is a forever book for me. I would love to upgrade it, however. It's a 9.4 CBCS signed by Jim Lee. The first published work by Jim Lee. Very hard to find in high grade, and hopefully one day I can upgrade that copy. Power Man and Iron Fist #54. I just love this art by Keith Pollard. I got it for such a great deal, and it's the first time the term Heroes for Hire is used. I think there's spec potential behind it, and I like looking at it, but eventually I will move on from that one. All-Star Comics #18 from 1943. Just an amazing, early Wonder Woman book. It's got the white pages, which is absolutely a bonus, especially for a Golden Age book. But it's just a wall hanger. It's something I can move on from. It's not a great investment. It's just a placeholder for a future Grail. Here we have Luke Cage, Hero for Hire #2 in a 9.8. The first appearance of Claire Temple, who's played by Rosario Dawson. I'm a huge fan of Rosario Dawson, and I'm a huge fan of Luke Cage, so when I saw this at a great price, I couldn't pass it up. I thought about selling it, like should I sell this and buy a Hero for Hire #1? But I actually would rather own one of the few copies of #2 in 9.8 than like a mid-grade copy of #1. So I'm happy to own that book. Strange Tales number 111. This is the first appearance of Asbestos Man, and this book is also from the collection of Joe and Nadia Manarino. I'm a huge fan of Asbestos Man. I think it's a great conversation starter, conversation piece. It's a super rare book. It's hard to find in high grade, so that's definitely a forever book. I doubt I will ever upgrade it unless an opportunity arises. Strange Tales number 4, another awesome Golden Age book. This is the first published work by John Romita Sr. in a 7.5. It's one of the highest graded copies in the world. Very, very difficult to find this book in general, especially in high grade. So that's part of my first published work collection, and that one is a keeper. Nova number 1 and 9.8. This is just a wall hanger. I will move on from it eventually. There's a little bit of sentimental value with it because I had my buddy Hugh in Canada at Grade Bump Comics on Instagram press it for me and submit it and finally get the 9.8 white pages. It's a book I submitted 5 times before I got a 9.8. Originally was a CBCS. I did a whole video on that if you're interested, called Submitting the Same Book 5 Times. Here is the ultimate custom personal collection books that I think one could actually get. This is the Bryce Comics exclusive for We Live Volume 2 number 1, the metal edition. We got the white and the black by Johnny Desjardins. I'm a huge fan of the We Live series. I'm a huge fan of Johnny Desjardins, and this is my store exclusive with a custom sketch by Johnny that I'm also a huge fan of zombies, and so he did a zombified version of me, and it says smash, like, subscribe. I mean, that is just the ultimate collector's item, personalized item. Definitely the most custom item in my collection, and I'm absolutely thrilled with that project and those books. This was one that I just could not pass up when I saw it come up. Fantastic Four number 82 with some classic Jack Kirby art in a 9.6. I got it for like $500 for a 9.6 12-cent Fantastic Four. I just could not pass it up with that amazing art by Jack Kirby, but you know, it's just a wall hanger. It will be replaced at some point. Punisher 218 second print, super rare book. Absolutely love the cover art, just a wall hanger. Iron Man number 54 and a 9.6. I love the cover art on this, and it's also the first appearance of Moondragon. But in this issue, she appears as Madam McEvil and later becomes Moondragon. I think eventually they will bring Moondragon to the MCU, so this is one of those books that I will sell eventually, but in the meantime, I love looking at it. Stan Lee statue. Absolutely incredible detail on this statue. It's the grandpa shoes that do it for me. I just love the grandpa shoes, and the base is just awesome too. There's like all of these things all the way around the base. There's the Hulk, there's Fantastic Four, all of the major characters and teams, the Stan Lee Signature Series plate, and it comes with a different head and different hand positions as well, but this is the one I like most. Then we also have the Wolverine statue. I've heard so many people say this is the first statue I ever bought. It's the same for me. First statue ever, just an epic Wolverine statue. I'll do a better review of this one, this Jason Fabok Batman with this epic flowing cape. I'll do a video detailing this a little bit more when I finally acquire the Batman Grail to go with it. So stay tuned for a future video on that. Here's my Oddballs oddly sized books. We have the first ever Bryce Comics exclusive Stray Dogs trade paperback, signed and sketched by both Tony Fleece and Trish Forstner. The first ever Bryce Comics exclusive, so definitely have to keep that. Deadly Hands of Kung Fu number 19 and a 9.6 with white pages. The first appearance of White Tiger. I think this book has a ton of potential, and it's also got this epic painted artwork on the front cover. This book is a CPR candidate. I will probably crack press and resubmit this. It just needs to be cleaned up a little bit on the back, and there's some non-color breaking finger bends on the front, so it's possible this could get a 9.8. There's only a handful of 9.8s, and that's a big book and a big price jump going from 9.6 to 9.8. Here's another book. I just have to have something Star Wars in the collection, right? And it was either this or Star Wars 1. And, you know, Star Wars 1, there's just so many copies of it. I can't bring myself to pay the prices that, you know, the high-grade copies are demanding. This one has a ton of first appearances, a ton of key significance, so I'm happy to have that just in a 9.6. There's also other magazine books that I will eventually add to the PC, so I'd like to have like a separate section of just magazine slabs and be a separate section of the wall. So there you have it, folks. Just me going over the books that are still in the PC. I hope to drastically change these books over the course of this year. Fingers crossed, but it may be a little bit longer than that. Who really knows? One thing's for sure. Collecting comics is the greatest hobby in the world. I'm enjoying the hell out of this. This is my dream job and it's my dream hobby. And I'm so grateful and thankful for all of you for coming along with me on the ride. I'd love to hear from you down in the comments below. What is your personal collection like? How many books do you allow yourself to have? Or is it just a free-for-all? It's all good. So many different ways to collect. Remember to always collect what you love. Thank you as always for sticking with me to the end of the video, and we'll catch you in the next one. Bye.
Bry's Comics.